in Napa Valley, California. We're a family-owned winery that has kind of three different faces. You're clearly familiar with the Anarchist, as you're kind of tuned in and watching right now. Anarchist focuses on exploring new techniques and varietal combinations, kind of thinking outside the box. Our sibling brand Foundry is more centered around specific grape varietals and or wines created from specific vineyards, time and place. And then there's the one ring to rule them all, the Wine Foundry. The Wine Foundry is Napa Valley's premier custom winemaking venue. Here, connoisseurs go from wine drinker to winemaker. Brands are incubated, dreams are made. Inquisitive Sips is a forum to ask and learn in pretentious free environs. Tonight, life is a box of chocolates. My colleague, Steve Ryan, I'm Stuart Ake. We're really excited to be with Elise Zahn of Cocotutti Chocolates in San Francisco. We'll unleash a wine typically reserved for our wine club. Tonight, we're going to unleash a wine typically reserved for our wine club members called Rage Against the Machine. And we are also proud to introduce a new wine to the Anarchist lineup tonight. You are the first people on the planet to taste 15 Minutes of Fame. It's a sparkling wine with a twist. And I'm going to open mine right now. In addition to the power of positive drinking, Elise will let us get a little peek into our artisanal production. And just as we do at the winery, Elise is dedicated her life to the pursuit of flavor. So we'll hear her stories and discuss how she explores and trials flavors for her award-winning lineup. Really excited that so many of you have ordered the chocolates and wines to taste along. If not, just pour yourself a glass of a favorite and enjoy the show. We record each episode and we'll send a link to your inbox tomorrow. And if you want to experience your own 15 Minutes of Fame with the 15 Minutes of Fame, you're now officially able to purchase at anarchistwineco.com. Watch, taste, and learn at your convenience. Ladies and gentlemen, I propose a toast to everybody, raising a glass to you.
Let's get it on.
We'll come back to the wines in a bit, but ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce to you the actor you've known for all these years, Elise Zahn of Cocotutti Chocolates. Elise, you've got something really special going on at Cocotutti and some yum prepared for the wines tonight. If you could kind of tell us what we're about to taste with the wine and shed some light on Cocotutti.
I'd be delighted. So I'm just going to give a quick, how did I get into this thing? So actually it started by going to the state fair, and I love doing that. And I started entering and I had so much fun, and I started winning some things, and my husband said, leave some awards for some other people. So I started my own business in 2010 with the chocolate. I actually had another business prior to that time. Went full-time in 2012, and this is where I'm at now. This is the kitchen behind me, and actually there's a big part of the kitchen in front of me you can't see. So one of the fun things that I like to do is I like to pair chocolate and wine with the idea of you exploring the wines through the chocolates. So one of the things we're going to do today is we're going to explore. This is green, it's lime. This is orange, it's orange. This lime one and this are delightful together. So what we're going to do is we're going to explore this wonderful 15 Minutes of Fame, and we're going to do this throughout. And I'm going to encourage everybody to do this same thing, whether you're listening to this or you're just enjoying wine on your own with other chocolates, which is you sip, you have a nibble, you have another sip. The purpose is for you to have the wine on your palate, have a flavor, in this case, the lime with Moroccan spices, and then you're going to sip again. You're going to explore to determine whether or not some of those rich, spicy notes and some of those tart notes from the lime go well with this. So if you've got a box of chocolates, go ahead and do that. Have a sip.
I'm going in.
Have a bite. Now I'm going a little fast. You should enjoy all of this. This is
Oh,
not meant
wow.
to, drop it
Elise,
down.
I've been tortured for the last hour because I've had these chocolates sitting next to me, as I was kind of working this afternoon, and I've been a good boy.
Good for
So
you.
there's a
You're
whole
gonna
lot of
get
flavor
some
going on here.
more. I will send you some more. So as you're exploring that, so the wine has got a little bit of a tartness to it, a little bit of an edge, which is really fun. You don't find that in champagne normally. So we're going to do the same thing with the orange. And while you're doing it, I'm just going to talk a little bit more.
Sure.
So again, what we're going to do is I develop chocolates for wineries. I develop chocolates for distillers. And I develop chocolates just because I have fun doing it. So the lime one was actually developed because I had run into a spice monger who's a friend. And I want to explore spices. And so this is one of them. I've got an Ethiopian spice that I use with a orange peel that I candy with Grand Marnier and also with this spice blend. That probably would go really well with this as well because it's got that citrus note. It's got a little bounce. Now, both Steve and Stuart, you tell me a little bit about what you think about this. What you think, not necessarily with the pairing, but how do you feel about this particular champagne?
Well, Steve, would you want to jump in there because Elise was just kind of talking about that sharp, that acidity. You want to kind of talk about how that plays?
Yeah, well, I was blown away by the pairing. I've actually always my well, maybe it's vast experience of eating chocolate and vast experience of drinking wine and a little bit of pairing together. Usually I go for like, a salted thing with a dark chocolate bit. I've never really experienced it with that. And the lime, you're right. I mean, the first thing you get is the lime popping out after you taste the wine, because the wine, I think, has not quite the same citrus notes. It has citrus notes, but it also has more tropical fruit to its nose and palate. So it's very complimentary. And then the spice comes through. And unfortunately, I just ate 3 of the greens. So I'm either going down the rabbit hole, or I've only got 1 left. So we'll see what damage I can do. But that's fascinating. And I actually I've been to Morocco, and you can get those spices coming through. It was a family trip about 20 years ago, but I do remember just kind of the essence of the flavors and all of that, and it really comes through. It's fascinating.
Now, when I first tasted this the other day, I thought of mango. Now, I do a mango. I didn't actually have one for this particular pairing, but I thought of mango, and again, a mango more on the tart side versus on the sweet side. I think too much sweet will bitter this.
Totally.
And that's something you've got to be really careful with chocolate and with wine. You want a chocolate that tends to be a little bit more on the acid or a little bit more on the bitter. And I'm going to jump ahead just for a second. If you look at that, it's very red on the bottom. And this one is fairly pink.
Yep, lighter.
And sorry, my nails are still blue and purple from airbrushing yesterday. So at any rate, the reason for that tartness is that they're freeze-dried fruit. And later we're going to explore that Rage Against the Machine. And again, we want to bring that tartness in so that the wine develops. It doesn't turn bitter. So that's, again, something to think about when you're pairing wine and chocolate. Don't go for sweet, sweet, sweet. Go for something a little bit more on the tart side. That's the reason why people love having that dark, that 72% or the 64 even. I use a lot of 64. And there are some unusual things because, Stuart, you were pointing out that it has to do with individual interests in their palate.
Yeah, so each one of us have our own histories, the things we were raised with. So we're going to be and we also have our own nomenclature for how we identify things. And I see a lot of people who get kind of nervous around, am I smelling blueberries? Am I smelling boysenberries? And it's like, just kind of let go of that and see what comes to you. When I was a little kid, we had to make a diorama of the tongue in 5th grade using a shoebox. And it was like, here's the sweet portion of the tongue. Here's the salty portion of the tongue. It turned out that it's great for teaching a 4th grader or a 5th grader in the classroom, but it's not really accurate. The mouth is really complex. We each bring our own things to the plate. I think we'll get into flavor in a little bit, because I really kind of want to take that to another level about how you develop the trials for how you develop the flavors.
Sure.
I'm gonna pass it over to Steve for a second. Steve, we've just heard about, like at least kind of walking us through flavor, walking us through kind of style and how we kind of do these things. You've unleashed something completely new on us tonight. What's going on with the you got unique packaging, there's a crown cap on it. Walk us through 15 minutes.
So, well, I like to think that we've unleashed it, Stu.
No, Steve,
I get all the blame. Okay,
no,
and
it's beautiful, man. Okay. It's fun.
So the 15 minutes of fame, it's actually interesting because Elise was saying mango, and I also think I get guava, papaya, and all those tropical kind of flavors, but not overly ripe. And the reason this wine came about is because one of our mainstays in the Anarchist Wine Co. lineup is Rosé Against the Machine, which I know a lot of you have had. And that's a wine made from the last two vintages, at least. The blend has turned out to be roughly 85% Tempranillo and 15% Mourvèdre, and as the base. And then we sprinkle in a little, maybe a few percent here or there less, and put in some Pinot Noir or whatever else we decide to make round it out. So this year we had the Mourvèdre, which was so much more pale in color, and but had this incredible aromatic to it that we kind of figured, like, well, what the hell are we going to do with the other 85% of the Mourvèdre that we're not using, and the 15% of Tempranillo? So we kind of came up with this idea to do a converse of the Rosé Against the Machine. And so we took the balance of what was left, and then also added in a little Pinot Noir, just like we did on the Rosé Against the Machine. And so this is I think it's 84%. I could be wrong, but I think it's 84 or 85% Mourvèdre, which is a pressed rosé. So it's a red grape that we pressed. Does not, as you can see, pick up very much color to it. It's more copper even than salmon color. And then 14 or 15% Tempranillo, and then 1% Pinot Noir. And so it's literally the exact opposite blend of our Rosé Against the Machine. And we figured, why not take it a little bit more interesting? And so we carbonated it. And then also, instead of doing a cork, we wanted to do a crown cap. So we really kind of took it to the other extreme. And it's a really fun wine. It's a summer drinker. So, while everybody is social distancing all summer, it's gonna, you can shout to your neighbors in their pool of how great this wine is, and it's fun. But it really is just kind of a really fun wine. It's a nod to, when we came up with this, we started talking about the quote that, in the future, everybody will have their 15 minutes of fame, which is Stu, I'm blanking on it. Who's the quote?
It's some little artist by the name of Andy. Oh yeah,
Warhol?
Andy Warhol. Yeah.
Warhol. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So there it is. That was Stu's birthday present from the company too, a little box set. So the the quote was kind of fun, and so we have we didn't have the kind of chutzpah to put the images we wanted to do on the label per se, because we didn't want to get into any sort of trademark infringement, but we kind of got into the road of like DeLoreans, and those of you that ordered the wines probably got the tech cards that came with it, and see there's a DeLorean on there, and a Blockbuster video card, and a MySpace logo, and a Betamax videotape, all of these things that kind of had their time and place in society, and they were great for a moment, and really the memory will stay with you. So that was the intent with the wine, and it's really just meant to be fun. We're trying to have some fun with it, and so the bright colored packaging, the alternative cap, and so drink it cold, drink it often, drink it well.
I will still advocate that Betamax was always better than VHS. It was a better format. I know it. They kind of isolated themselves, but that was picture quality was better for the tapes there.
My friend Blu-ray, you should meet him. You guys should hang out.
I'm just catching on to Blu-ray right now, man. I'm a person who lives in the past.
So I'm gonna jump back. I'd say, at this point we could go ahead, if those of you that have the wines, and by the way, if you don't have these wines, grab whatever's closest to you, and pour it in your glass. Maybe we shift over to the Rage Against the Machine.
Sure.
Should we do that?
Yeah.
That's the bottle.
There we go. That's the one. Yours is a lot emptier than mine, at least.
Well, it sort of looks like that, but I have to say, I am the only two-fisted drinker in this group right now.
Yay!
To me.
What are you talking about?
The power of positive drinking.
Oh, wait a minute. Now I get three. I just can't hold them all.
So, Rage Against the Machine. I'm not going to get into it yet. I'll leave that for a minute. But I just want to kind of transition over and then toss it back to Elise. But before we get into the next chocolates, Elise, can you take us through a little bit more of the process? Like, I notice on here you've got these beautiful molds that look, for those that can't see, there are these beautiful molds on here that are airbrushed. Are they airbrushed? Is that right?
Some are airbrushed, some are hand painted, some are both.
Wow,
so everything is colorfully decorated.
So then they've got these beautiful circles, and there's other that are squares here. And so I'm just doing this so that I can lick my fingers after I touch it. But
okay, I'll give you the primer on this.
Yeah, give it to me. Thank you.
The entire process in one tray, and then I will show you some other examples of it. So you start off with the mold, you do the painting, and if you want to do multiple colors, this is the place where you do it. So you can sort of see that the colors change.
Cool.
I'm losing them here, but that's okay. They're falling out. So it starts as red, and then it blends into kind of a peachy color. And I was working on that today. So starts as red. When I start adding the white, you can see that there's kind of a breeze that goes through it.
So that's you're painting with a brush inside the mold?
Right. So they're hand painted. I have hundreds of molds, which means I'm hundreds of molds hand painting. And these little guys, these orange ones, those are all hand painted with orange and with yellow. These little green ones are airbrushed with green and with blue. There's a little blue on there.
Mm-hmm.
So the next step in the process is you fill all the molds with chocolate so that they form a shell. So I was working on that. This is a bar mold. And then just to show you, I pulled one of these out earlier. Which one is it? That's what it's going to look like when people see it. So that's sprinkled with gold, and then it's airbrushed with green, and it will get another coat, a light dusting of gold. But the reason for these pockets for this shell is so that I can put the filling in. And so in this case, this is the strawberry filling. Now, when we finish, there's a couple different ways to do it. One of them is to finish it simply with the chocolate. Another is to finish it with another flavor. And when I talk to bartenders about working with them to explore their specific recipes, I call it the rim of the glass, because this touches your tongue first. This is what we were talking about in terms of having something a little tart on your tongue when you're drinking wine, because you don't want to bitter the wine. Another way to do that is to put a transfer sheet on it. And transfer sheets can result in all sorts of different
kind of layers,
patterns, yeah,
patterns and things. So this one is the dark one that we're going to be looking at later, and that's purple, and it actually has some silver in it. So it's a multi-step process. It can take me a week to make a chocolate. So color, chocolate shell, filling, more chocolate, washing, because the washing is just as important. For wines, it's just the same. You guys have to have clean in order for it to be a perfect wine. And it's the same thing with chocolate. Now, we were talking a little bit about some of the the Tragedies of Chocolate. And what happens with that is if it's too hot or if it's too humid or during the course of time when I'm tempering this, something happens. You can end up with 15 pounds of a big chocolate bar that you have to start all over the next day with. So it's sort of like riding a bicycle. When you get used to it, you start figuring out how to do things. Now, I've worked and stop me when I'm talking too much. So I've worked in other kitchens, they're called commissaries. And in one of those kitchens, I was working in a 90-degree kitchen doing chocolate, which should be done at 65 degrees. I worked at other kitchens where it was 40 degrees because it was winter. And it's really hard to keep chocolate from clumping really fast and, you know, something like that. So you learn how to work with it. It's a very flexible material in some ways. You heat dark up to 115, you work at it. It's called the working temperature is between 89 and 91 degrees. If it's hot, you drop it down. If it's cold, you raise the temperature. So it's just something you learn. I do everything over a pot of hot water. So here's my equipment. I've got an induction burner. I've got a pot of water that you could boil spaghetti in. I've got a big bowl that goes on top that carries 15 pounds of chocolate, and I heat it all up. And then I put it in another bigger bowl that's got a heating pad underneath it, and I've got a heat gun. And I've also got a lizard lamp. I'm you know, really high tech here. And that keeps everything within the temperature range it needs to be. Now, I know with wines, you've got issues with more with the sugar in the grapes, but to be honest, I don't really know too much about whether you've got temperature issues or you've got humidity issues.
Temperature is everything during fermentation and aging. Steve, you wanna jump on it for a minute?
And storage
And storage, yeah.
shipping.
Yep.
Yeah, temperature.
And I've got a question here. We'll come back here for Elise about shipping shortly. Somebody texted, which was, you can use the Q&A.
Yeah. Tell Shelly to stop texting you from the living room.
Thank you. Exactly.
Yeah, temperature, absolutely. I mean, with fermentation at varying degrees. All right, I'm going to try to do this in a non-geek way.
You're not going to go fermentation science?
So, yeah, exactly. But basically, the temperature is going to determine, at the end of the day, it's going to end up determining a lot of the flavors. And it gets there through different biochemical pathways, and I won't get into that. But whether you ferment a wine on white wines, for example, like on the 15 minutes, even though it is a rosé, technically, a sparkling rosé, we make it like a white wine. And so we usually take that temperature very slow or very low and ferment it very slowly. On a red wine, depending on what we want, if it's a big red wine, like a Cabernet Sauvignon or a Syrah, which there is a chunk of Syrah in this wine, which Stu will talk about in a few minutes, but we want more extraction, we want more flavors, we want more depth of color. All of that's going to happen through enzymatic activity and be determined by the fermentation temperature. So there we're going to go up to like 88 to 94 degrees. And it also depends on the condition of the fruit. There's no right recipe for it, but yeah. And then temperature and aging is going to, basically keep the wines protected, keep them very kind of stable, and then all the way through to even in bottling, temperature is important, because if you don't have the right temperature while you're bottling, the liquid will expand and could leak up the cork and bleed through on the capsule. Or, if you're smart and you don't use a cork, totally not a problem. But you can have overfills and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, temperature is our friend, and thank you, temperature.
Yeah, so in some ways we've got a lot of parallel. We've got the business of the temperature. You probably have a bit of a humidity. I've got one additional issue. You get one set of vines per year, or set of grapes. I get two. We get a wet season and a dry season.
Oh.
And for most people, when they're blending chocolate, I work a lot with Guittard, and I work with Valrhona, is that they put together blends so they can come together sort of like a maritage, where you're always trying to achieve that sort of balance that you're looking for. But if you're going purely with those chocolates, they can have different lifespans. They could be part of the same family, but they're not talking to each other. There is a spat in that family, and no one is going to, you know, make that work. So I've actually had to change my techniques to meet the different problems of a different harvest. Or I've gotten chocolates from other people, and they didn't tell me, but it reacted so differently that I actually had an entire batch fail. An entire batch for me means there's something around 800 bars that have failed. They've just,
Wow.
the temperature range and the rest of it just simply didn't work. But since we're talking about temperature, you had a question about temperature, Stuart, I think.
Yeah, so Florentia texted in and just said, so because we were going to stop our summer shipping season, and where we can't ship via ground because the wines might get cooked. And as Steve said, he was referring more in terms of bottling, but since liquids expand, we could also end up having wine kind of squeak by the cork or cook the wine too, start turning it to vinegar. Are you allowed to ship year round, or do you have kind of a shipping season or shipping locally? How does shipping play with
Cold
chocolate?
pack?
What's that?
Or like cold pack? Do you pack anything cold in with
Yeah.
it? Something?
Yeah, it doubles the cost of the shipping because I need to add the cold packs. And then one thing I do too is I change the formulations. So I won't ship caramels over the summer because the opportunity for those caramels to leak, much like you're talking about the wine, the opportunity there is for those things to leak, and it's just a big splat when you get it. It's delicious. You can put it in the microwave and throw it on ice cream, and it's terrific, but it's not very appealing. So instead I go, so just a real brief primer, there's caramels, there's ganaches. Within the ganache format, there's butters, there's coconut oils, there's that. The purest form of ganache is heavy cream and chocolate, and that's it. But with me, a lot of times I will use what I call butter recipes, which are butter-based versus cream-based, because they don't expand as much. They've done their thing. That's what they're going to be. They travel very beautifully over in the air. So if I took a chance on the Postal Service and I shipped them overnight by air, they're going to arrive hopefully in the same condition. It won't have anything to do with temperature. It won't have anything to do with humidity. It just has to do with the travel itself. But the caramels tend to leak. And if people have got a box, this is one of them. I don't know if it really shows up. There's a little bit of a freckle on it. And then this one is another one, which is blue. And this one is whiskey with caramel.
Okay, don't mind if I do.
Yeah, exactly. Now that whiskey is a Four Roses small batch bourbon whiskey. It goes great with caps. So I change the formulations when I'm shipping in the summer. I try to do it within 24 hours. I don't ship at the end of the week because the chances of somebody not being at that location to receive delivery are higher than at the beginning of the week. So it is sort of, it's a similar thing with wine. You've got to be careful about how it ships and when it ships, but it can be done.
And it's really interesting that I never really realized. I mean, I guess I hadn't really thought about it, but similar to wine, you also take into account blending and different formulations and percentages. And so that's, I mean, I wonder right now what happens if I ate this other one that is mostly black with some dashes of purple. And
oh yeah, that's a nice one. That should go really well with that red. Now, what I'm finding though with these two glasses, for people who've got different glasses, more vanilla, less vanilla.
Oh, Val is gonna send you a couple of bottles for that one. One of our colleagues, Valerie, had inspired us to kind of play with different glass shapes when we did our very first one of these about 6 or 7 weeks ago. And so she's on here somewhere and probably really loving that comment. So I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. Were there some other questions related to temperature or something?
You actually got it. So somebody had asked about one of the challenges of of molding when you're creating the molds, and then the other one was during shipping. And you kind of said how you set the precedent talking about temperature specifically with mold, right? When you're
Oh, yeah.
is it molding the chocolate, or is there a chocolate phrase that's used in the industry?
I just say that I'm using molds. So some people do truffles, which means they roll them in their hands. That's sort of the gateway
Yep.
drug into chocolates, as you start
Yep.
with truffles. Some people say Zinfandel is the gateway drug into red wine. So again, similar practice. The one other thing that happens, and Steve, you alluded to it in your practice, is there's different temperatures. So I basically use freezers a lot in my process. So I heat the chocolate, I pour it into the mold. You can see I pour it out of the mold, otherwise that'd be a solid block. These go right into the freezers. And if they don't pull away immediately, you can sort of see that there's a translucence to this. If they don't, they're going to be a very dark color and they're never going to come out of the mold, which means they just go right into the dish pit and they get washed. You don't even bother with any other steps. It's never going to happen. So for chocolate, sometimes people ask me a little bit about that whole business of, can you refrigerate them? Can you freeze them? And the rest of it. I generally say, if you're going to put them in the freezer, then you start by putting them in the refrigerator to defrost. Never just pull them out.
Okay.
So, get them to start dehumidifying or humidifying or whatever you need to do, but don't go just from one to another. Too radical a change. But my chocolates spend most of their time either in the freezer or the refrigerator. Probably 95% of their life is there.
And is that a regular type of freezer, or is it like a blast chiller, or is it?
I use just a regular freezer right now, regular residential ones. I was talking to somebody the other day. I would eventually like a cooling tunnel, but that is more money than I'm making right now. So I will not go that route. Yeah, so they're 30-foot and 40-foot cooling tunnels, and I have the space but not the cash.
Perfect. Well, I think we're going to get a GoFundMe going with all of these people that are on this call. So if everybody spends $5, we're totally going to nail that one. Stu, I'm gonna ask you a little bit. I spoke about the first wine. Do you mind talking a little bit about Rage Against the Machine?
Yeah, sure. So Rage Against the Machine, it really kind of embodies what we're doing with Anarchist Wine Co. So just be prepared here. This is a 2017 wine. We went 2017, which we'll allude to in a second, a very interesting, challenging year. It started off a day just like any other day. The vintage was fantastic, shaping up, but then we had some challenges. For those who don't live in the area, 2017 is when Sonoma and Napa kind of burst into flame. And so although the grapes came through unscathed, we had harvested almost everything on this prior to the fires. Then when the fires came, just a lot of uncertainty. But let's taste this. Let's get in there and give it a whirl.
So one of the things I like about this wine is that there's I think it's 8 different varieties blended together.
Yeah. So.
And 2 of them are very aromatic whites.
So I was just going to get into that. So no, it's okay. This is not a traditional wine. If you were kind of looking for something that is, wine culture-ish, Rage Against the Machine is not for you. In this glass, 85% Syrah, 3% a grape called Petit Verdot, usually associated with Bordeaux. And then the wheels came off the bus. 3% Viognier, 2% Gewürztraminer, 2% Zinfandel, 2% Petit Syrah, 2% Counoise, and 1% Cab Franc. And Steve just alluded to it. There's 2 grapes in there that normally wouldn't belong. Viognier and Gewürztraminer. But in some ways, they do belong, because in the southern Rhone of France, where they have something called Châteauneuf-du-Pape, they put all sorts of grapes together, red and white. And we did the same here. We included Gewürztraminer, highly aromatic. That's what makes the kind of lifts the wine and makes your hair stand on end. Mine, as you can tell, is just headed for the ceiling. And then the other grape we put in there, another 3%, is Viognier, another highly aromatic grape. So we just kind of wanted to make the head swim with Rage Against the Machine. And if you, if you talk to your sommelier about this, they're going to probably kind of start shaking in the corner because this defies all logic and laws of traditional winemaking.
So Elise, can you talk to us about some of the pairings here? Actually, right before you get into that, there is a question from somebody on the Q&A, which is, when would you offer the chocolates? Always at the end of the meal, or possibly alternatively at a different time?
I would typically do it at the end of the meal. And one reason, and I'm going to hold this box up and probably tip it, but one reason is that with a variety, you can now, okay, so back up for a second here. I once made a lunch for somebody that lasted 12 hours. We had 8 courses.
That's
and by
typical.
the end of it, we had a lot of wine left. And something like this is really helpful in enjoying those little bits and pieces of wine at the end. You could, in fact, take some of these things as sort of like a little bit of a pause. If you're having something really heavy, if you're having like heavy meats and heavy sauces and the rest of it, you might want to have something that's just more like a granita, or something that's just a little bit spunkier, like the lime, that will just refresh your palate a bit.
Awesome.
Yeah, it just, this actually, I'll put in a little bit of a note, international award winner.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That should have been our job. International award winner.
It was United States, Central America, South America, only bar winner. So
it looks like this, folks.
Looks like that. I did not win against the Italians in the overall, but that's okay. I'm still very happy with what I got.
The pesky Italians.
Yeah, there you go. They're marvelous people anyway. But you can go ahead and I've had people literally serve me a sweet course right in the middle of a 7-course meal. It didn't quite go well, but just because of what they chose for the sweet. But be fun, have adventures. It doesn't have to be, the way that it is. It doesn't have to be an appetizer and then a soup course and then a main course and then the salad and then the cheese plate and then the dessert, which is what I do for lunches and dinners, which take longer than 12 hours to finish. But at any rate, just have fun. I think one of the things that I really love about this champagne is that it's lively and it's fun. And then when you get to the reds kind of transition a bit over time, which makes it even more fun because, for me anyway, it's like, let's explore something else with it. This isn't just going to be some stodgy wine where it's going to be the same from start to finish. And I could name a couple of really cheap wineries that will have that kind of wine. So I think it's really a fun exploration for people throughout the course, not just a meal, but, sitting back, enjoying a few minutes to yourself and, just hide the bottle. Just keep it close.
That's oftentimes how I wake up in the morning. So Elise, can you take us through? I think there's 3 or 4 different chocolates you'd identified out of the box that might be bring something different out in the Rage Against the Machine.
Let me take a couple of them and see how skilled I am at this, which is probably going to go disastrously wrong.
You can do it. You can do it.
I'll try. Oh, of course, that one has to go astray. Okay, we're going to try this. Red, raspberry, purple, dark chocolate. White and yellow are almond butter crunch with cinnamon, and then the pink is strawberry.
So the dark chocolate that has purple on it.
Purple, yeah. So Sip.
Like this?
That's the one.
All right,
But
winner.
sip your wine first,
Do you
then
have a,
have the chocolate, and then sip.
do you have a recommendation?
Everybody else,
Of
you
like,
do the same thing.
should we do it in order of some kind?
No, it's
Oh,
all what you
this is
want.
anarchy right here.
Usually what I do is I'll go from, I won't do two berries together. I wouldn't do the raspberry and then the strawberry. I have
Okay.
like a little intermezzo. Do something in between. Now, one of the things that I like about this almond butter crunch, which are these guys, is that the almonds, and I make my own almond butter, so I tend to roast it fairly dark, and I like picking up some of the expression of the barrel. So if you're using a medium
Mhm.
toast barrel
Yep.
or a dark toast barrel, some of these darknesses will be picked up by the notes, the flavored roasty toasty notes in these chocolates. So it's not just simply an expression of, oh, I really like almond, I should have this, and you should. But you can maybe start tasting some of the barrel in this. You can taste
You
some.
really can on the almond, absolutely.
Oh my goodness, yes.
You can taste some of the berry notes. You don't have to necessarily know that it's a raspberry, but it is a darker one. I do a blackberry, which even deepens it. I do the strawberry mostly for pinots, and you can pick up some of the floral notes in the
Yeah, I see that.
pinots with this. So I think people should explore. And if you don't have these chocolates, not to worry. You don't have to buy them from me, in all honesty. Go to this, well, you can't go to the store. Go online and find 5 different bars that you love off of Amazon or whatever. And then get them home and break them up and you can either do a blind tasting or you can just set them out and then do the sip, eat, sip, and just keep doing that. Now, I talk a lot and I'll just spend another moment. So when I'm formulating these recipes, I will do what I call a barrel test. And we can explore your barrel tests in a minute. But this is the way my barrel tests go, is that if I'm pairing it with a wine, is that I will take a whole series of spices out. And, oh, that is so cute. Thank you, Stuart. I will take a whole series of spices out and I will have a sip of wine and I will actually taste cinnamon. And then I'll go to roasted black pepper and I will sip, eat, sip. And I will start developing a palette of flavors that I think are going to go with that wine. So it's one of those days where my husband makes dinner because I've got a whole bottle that I've drunk myself. And I've had all of these things that, in all honesty, shouldn't be just drunk with, like tasting pepper and tasting cinnamon. But that's the way that I do it. Then the next step of the process is I'll start blending those into different chocolates. And I'm actually doing a taste testing right now with a series of people. I'm developing a series of bars for Christmas. It's my Christmas season already. And so I go through a whole series of variations. So if I think that it's black pepper and cinnamon, and I once made a curry 5-spice. I make my own 5-spice blend, and then I'm going to be making my own curry blends for a cab that was earthy versus fruity. And so it was a matter of coming to a really lovely balance and then making sure that it drew out the best of that cab. That was an unexpected cab because no one ever thinks of an earthy cab. You think of a fruity cab. And so sometimes it can go through as many as 62 iterations before I get that chocolate where I want it to go. Sometimes it goes through less than that. I have a tendency to over experiment, which is fine because my taste testers love it. It just means that they're getting a lot of chocolate. And then they have to fill out a form and photograph it and send it back to me. So we're in the start of this s'mores bar. I'm sending 5 different ones out. I'll get that back. I'll take the top 2. I'll redo them. Then I will cover them with different chocolates. Then I will get it back. And then I will start the final process. So it'll probably end up with maybe 10 different items that they have gone through to taste test. And then the last one, they'll get the design, the final, and all the rest of it. And they report back to me. And then that goes on the shelf.
Elise, we do the same thing with trials. I mean, Steve,
Oh, cool.
our director of winemaking, Patrick, like taste, Patrick kind of brings everybody in. We taste blind and numerous iterations. It's the same process. It's fascinating.
There's a lot.
I just want to ask you if you would, when you send out 5 bars, will you send 6?
I can send out a lot of things. I'm already determining what the next 2 other products are, and there's going to be sort of a similar circumstance, but one of them is going to have a bitter orange chocolate that will then be on this bar and then dipped in more chocolates. And then there was another one I was thinking about with dried cherries and almonds, and I might use those Italian cherries because I really do love those Italian cherries.
So we do have somebody asking for a little clarification. You see that, Sue?
Yeah, I was just gonna type it in, but Elise, you can jump, and I'm gonna actually add a second question that I have, so it can be a 2-part question. So the question was, if we could just kind of review the wine. Question number 1 was if we could kind of review the chocolates that we've tasted. And then my question,
I think paired with the Rage, right? That was the specific one.
Prepared with the Rage. And then my question is, I instinctively went to smell the chocolate, just being a wine person. In chocolate culture, because I know in cheese culture, when I'm working with some people who make cheese, they're like, I don't want you to like purposely smell it first, or I do want you to purposely smell it first. What about chocolate?
And grab something really quick.
Sure. Steve is going to sing
a
song.
What are you up to today?
I have 25
she's back. Thank goodness you saved us.
Next to me. This is actually an integral part when you're talking about this kind of chocolate. The first thing you do is you look at it and see what the color is. The second thing you do is you rub it to warm, and then you smell it.
Okay.
And then you break it to see if it has a nice sharp sound to it, because that means it's well tempered. They can get damaged in shipping. They look a little grimy here, but when they first come out, there's this gorgeous dark color. So yes, it is entirely appropriate to smell the chocolate. You can take some of these and just break them in your fingers and smell them too. It's a little bit messier to eat, but yeah, it can, having a nose off of a wine can prepare you for the deliciousness that's going to occur. Sometimes it won't follow through in the taste, but it gives you a sense of where the wine's going. Same thing with the chocolate. You can smell it. I know a lot of people who do. And when it's things like this, the raspberry, you're going to get a whiff of that berry note. And again, that sort of mentally sets you up for things. Kind of going back to the idea of what goes with the red, with, again, this is the one. So with reds, I generally start with berries. So we've got raspberry here, dark. So you're looking for some dark notes. If you're looking for the lighter notes, you go for the strawberry, a little bit lighter. I do have, like I say, I have a blackberry. I don't have it in this box. If you really want to approach it from what is that nice toasty barrel, then you're going to go with the almond butter crunch. The only reason they're different colors is when I did my my transfer sheet, I happened to do it in reverse by accident. If you want to go with sort of the purity, the whole red experience, go with the dark. Again, you're exploring the dark notes of the wine. You're exploring the blending of that with your toastiness of the barrel, whether it's a medium toast or a dark toast of the barrel. Some people want to be pure about it. Just get yourself a dark barb. There's some that are really beautiful. They can be single origin, which means that every 6 months, that's going to change. You're never going to get the same bar again. You're looking for the darkness. You're looking for a lively, a delicious aroma. And then you're looking for the snap. Can't really hear it on the computer.
No, it came through.
So that's the taste testing process when you're just getting to chocolate, aside from the filled chocolates.
So, quick, we do have a question here on the Q&A asking if the chocolate typically purchased already tempered, or would you do that in-house at times, and are there benefits to either?
Okay, so there's two different types of chocolatier. There's a bean to bar. A lot of people are familiar with them. I'm what's called a fondeur or a melter. So I take tempered chocolate. I do have chocolate that I receive from certain people that I work with that is not tempered, which means then I have to go through the tempering process. So just a really brief exploration of tempering. You bring the chocolate up to a certain temperature, sort of like the wine. In this case, dark is 115, milk and white tend to be between 110, 113. It depends on the manufacturer. There can be a 10 to 15 degree variation according to manufacturer. You bring it up to that temperature. What you want to do is break the bonds in the chocolate. So you don't want it to look like this. You want it to be all melty, because when it reforms, you want it to reform however you want it to reform: squares, circles, bars. The classic process. So if I've got untempered chocolate, in order to use it, I need to temper it first. You bring it to this heat, then you need to cool it. You need to cool it to a certain temperature, which is the working temperature. And then you usually want to cool that fairly quickly so that the bonds form or will form to whatever structure shape you want it to form in. A lot of people will do, which is what I do, is I do what's called seeding. I take these tempered bits and I put them in this big bowl of melted chocolate, and I stir it around so that they melt, and at the same time they bring so it's a physics exploration, right? You're transferring heat. And so you throw the bits in, they're fev, they're discs, they're all sorts of different names. And you want to bring it to your working temperature, and then you want it to vary only within a few tenths of a degree. You don't even want it to vary within a degree, because you can have so many problems. So my working temperature is typically 89.7 to 89.9. That's what I like working with, depending upon the temperature and humidity of the kitchen. So yeah, I can work with untempered. It's an extra step. It's sort of frustrating. I'll temper it just so I can then take it and I can temper the rest of the batch by using my first batch as my seeding chocolate.
You know, I'm just going to kind of chime in here. When you're talking about humidity, one thing that we used to have to do, we used to measure something using a bouilliometer to measure the alcohol levels, and we would have to kind of do elevation in terms of kind of determining, running a little algorithm to help determine our alcohol levels and stuff like that. Hey, we're starting to run out of time.
So I would say, first of all, if anybody has any questions that either they were shy and didn't want to ask, that the three of us will stay on here for a couple more minutes. We're going to stop the recording in just a minute, but I don't want people to drop off quite yet, because we do this Anarchist Wine Co. / Foundry Wines Inquisitive Sips webinar every other Wednesday, and the Wednesdays in between we do our winery is called Wine Foundry, or the Wine Foundry, excuse me. And so we alternate weeks between that. Some are, the Wine Foundry Wednesdays are winemaking, viticulture, enology, and stuff like that. We also have a lot of guests on there. Next week we're doing, next Wednesday we're doing a thing with Coopers. And then Anarchist Wine Co. and Foundry Wines Inquisitive Sips is about experiential stuff like this. This is the first time we've kind of reached outside of wine, I believe, and at least it's been fantastic. I've learned a ton about chocolate, and I've also eaten. They're tiny chocolates, so I feel good about this. I feel like tomorrow I'm still going to be able to get up and go, and I'm really excited about that. We're going to do some cheese in a couple of weeks with Cowgirl Creamery. We're talking to some chefs as well, but I would like to very much give a round of applause for Elise Zahn and a big toast. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
And Stu, sorry I jumped on you because I know you were going to close this home, but
cheers, everybody.
Cheers, folks. Thank you so much, and we'll stay on.